Amidst the crashing waves of life, where circumstances toss us about and events unfold beyond our power to repel them, Stoic philosophy emerges as a beacon of wisdom, illuminating the paths of the mind and rescuing us from the depths of anxiety and futile emotional reactivity. It is not merely an academic theory to be read in the pages of books, but rather a daily practice and a spiritual antidote aimed at liberating the self from the servitude of external things. Stoicism is an explicit invitation to rediscover our inner strength and to direct our compass toward humanity's ultimate goal in this philosophy: inner peace and living in harmony with the nature of things. The dichotomy of control, the art of mastering reactions. The cornerstone upon which the entire edifice of Stoicism is built, and the first step toward internal liberation, manifests in the principle established by the philosopher Epictetus, known as the dichotomy of control. This principle stems from a definitive and strict truth. There are things within our control and others that fall completely outside our will. What is outside our control? We hold no authority over the course of the universe. We do not control economic fluctuations, the actions and words of others, a past that is gone, or even an illness that might suddenly afflict our bodies. These are all external events imposed upon us. What is within our control? We have been granted absolute sovereignty over our internal kingdom. That is, over our thoughts, our interpretations of events, the emotions generated by those interpretations, and the actions we choose to take. When one grasps this crucial separation, a paradigm shift in consciousness occurs. One stops squandering psychological energy fighting windmills and escapes the trap of constant complaining about a reality they cannot change. Here, true psychological tranquility is born. It does not stem from a world devoid of troubles and provocations, but from fortifying the mind, building an impenetrable dam that prevents external events from seeping in to spoil the soul's serenity. Active influence versus passive resignation. However, we must not fall into the trap of a flawed understanding that confuses Stoicism with passive resignation. Our realization of the absence of absolute control over results does not in any way mean a lack of influence. True Stoicism is a highly active and dynamic philosophy. It does not call upon us to sit idly by awaiting fate, but rather invites us to direct all our energies with rigor and focus toward the matters we can influence, while completely letting go of attachment to the final outcome. The archer metaphor. This meaning is clearly illustrated in the archer metaphor frequently invoked by Stoics. The archer trains diligently, selects their bow carefully, estimates the distance, and aims with high concentration. All of this effort falls within their circle of control and influence. But the moment the arrow slips from their fingers, the matter leaves their hands. A sudden gust of wind might blow, or the target might shift abruptly, causing the arrow to miss its mark. The Stoic does not collapse or grow angry if they miss the target, knowing that their success and virtue lie in mastering the process of archery itself, and in the quality of the effort exerted, not in the inevitability of hitting the mark. Such is life. Stoicism asks us to be champions in our endeavors, to exert the maximum possible effort within our sphere of influence, and then to accept whatever fate brings with an open heart and a balanced mind, knowing that we have done what our duty dictates and that the rest was never in our hands to begin with. Once the mind absorbs the principle of the dichotomy of control and becomes certain of the limits of its dominion, it stands face to face with the next, more profound challenge in Stoic practice. How do we deal with those events that fall outside our will when they actually occur? Here, the trajectory of our discussion takes us toward the second pillar that grants the soul its lightness and peace. Acceptance of what cannot be controlled, the art of reconciling with reality. At its core, human suffering, as Stoicism sees it, does not stem from the cruelty of the external world as much as it stems from the fierce mental resistance we exhibit toward this world. We agonize because we stipulate that the universe must run according to our desires and expectations, and when it fails to do so, we declare a futile war against it. Therefore, the next Stoic step invites us to acceptance, which is not merely a cold acknowledgement of reality, but rather a calm embrace of what the inevitability of life imposes upon us, and a refusal to waste a lifetime fighting currents over which we have no power. The traffic jam metaphor. Imagine yourself stuck in a suffocating traffic jam on your way to a highly important appointment. The cars are completely stopped, and time is slipping through your hands. The average person in this situation falls prey to anger, honking the horn violently, sweating, cursing their luck, and burning up inside. But did their anger move a single car forward? Absolutely not. The objective reality is the existence of a traffic jam, whereas the pain, stress, and frayed nerves are optional add-ons that the human mind decided to attach to the event through its rejection of reality. The Stoic in that very same car realizes that the traffic jam is a reality they cannot remove by decree, so they immediately cease their mental resistance. This cessation of fighting what is grants the mind instant peace, separating the external event, the traffic jam, from the internal state, tranquility, perhaps utilizing this time to listen to an audiobook or organize their thoughts, transforming a moment of stress into a space for calm. But here, we must take a firm stance to dismantle a dangerous confusion that many fall into, mixing up Stoic acceptance with passive resignation or submission. Acceptance does not in any way mean being content with injustice, justifying negligence, or retreating before obstacles under the pretext that they are simply reality. Resignation is saying, I am weak and reality is bad, so I will stay where I am and swallow the bitterness. Stoic acceptance, on the other hand, is the courageous stance that says, this is reality right now, with all its cruelty and complexity. I see it clearly and do not deceive myself by wishing it were different. And now, starting from this solid ground, what is the best action I can take? Acceptance, then, is letting go of illusions and wishful thinking to begin real work. It is the starting line, not the finish line. The power of perspective, spiritual alchemy, and transforming obstacles into elevation. If acceptance is ceasing to fight reality, then the power of perspective is the magical tool that enables us to reshape this reality within our minds. Stoic philosophers, led by the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, teach us that events in themselves are neutral. They are neither good nor evil. Rather, it is our thoughts that endow them with these qualities. From this emerges the art of reframing, the ability to replace the mental lens through which we view the world. In the journey of life, we are met with difficulties and challenges, and we might see them through our automatic lens as towering walls blocking our path and bringing misery. But Stoicism invites us to change this lens completely so that the obstacle itself becomes the way. When you face a difficult person, lose a job opportunity, or go through a health crisis, the Stoic perspective does not merely see this as bad luck, but rather as a training ground sent by life to strengthen your spiritual muscles. The provoking person is an opportunity to practice the virtue of patience and avoid anger. The job loss is an invitation to rediscover your talents and practice the virtue of resilience. The crisis is a test of your fortitude. With this radical shift in perspective, suffering transforms from a shackle that bleeds the wrist into a sculpting tool that shapes the best version of ourselves. Here you practice spiritual alchemy, turning the lead of pain into the gold of wisdom. Since the nocturnal trial of thoughts through journaling sharpens our mental lens before sleep, the break of dawn demands a different kind of preparation from us. Stoic philosophy does not merely settle for repairing the damage caused by yesterday's shocks. It proactively anticipates tomorrow's challenges. Here we transition from the realm of theoretical understanding and perspective shifting to the arena of practical training. Just as the body needs a gymnasium to grow stronger, the soul needs what can be termed Stoic exercises to build its immunity and resilience. Stoic exercises, the spiritual gymnasium and fortifying the mind. A Stoic's life does not begin simply by stepping out of the house and colliding with the world. It begins in those quiet moments before sunrise. Morning meditation is not a ritual for passive relaxation, but a conscious summoning of willpower and a setting of the day's compass. In this meditation, one reminds oneself of their highest values, and that virtue is the only true good. It is psychological preparation to face an imperfect world, evoking the famous practice of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius in his meditations. As he readied himself every morning, today I shall meet with meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, and envious people. And they act this way because they do not know the difference between good and evil. This reflection is not a call to pessimism, but a protective shield that absorbs the shock of disappointment in human beings and guards the mind against the surprises of twisted human nature. From the womb of this realization of the world's reality emerges the exercise of Stoic gratitude. Gratitude here differs from a naive romantic view. It is a profound thankfulness stemming from the awareness of the fragility of blessings. A Stoic is grateful for their health, their family, and their warm cup of coffee, not because these things are guaranteed and enduring, but precisely because they are temporary and liable to vanish at any moment. This awareness grants simple things unprecedented intensity and depth, making us live the present moment completely, without taking any blessing for granted as an acquired right. However, to complete this fortification, the Stoics invented their most powerful and daring psychological tool, the exercise of imagining the worst-case scenarios, premeditatio malorum. It is a technique that relies on visualizing the loss of what we love, failure in our pursuits, or the occurrence of a feared catastrophe, projecting it clearly onto the screen of the mind. The goal is not self-torture, but rather stripping the future of its element of surprise. When you imagine bankruptcy, illness, or loss, and realize deep down that, despite the harshness of the scene, you still retain your mind, your values, and your ability to choose, the monster of fear shrinks and diminishes. By doing this, you disarm fate of its weapon of shock. Application caveats: the trap of emotional exhaustion. Here we must highlight a highly important and delicate angle that is often overlooked in superficial explanations of this exercise: emotional exhaustion and slipping into pathological anxiety. For a beginner in Stoicism, the exercise of imagining the worst might turn into a waking nightmare, where the mind drowns in the details of loss and emotions react as if it were a reality, leading to severe psychological depletion and anticipatory depression. True Stoicism warns against this emotional drowning. This exercise must be practiced in measured doses and in a clinical and objective manner. It is akin to taking a vaccine. You introduce a severely weakened virus into your body in a tiny amount to provoke the immune system, not to make yourself sick. This is how visualizing the worst should be: a quick, objective glimpse of what might happen, aimed at formulating a rational plan to deal with it if it does, and then, most importantly, a swift return to living in the present moment and enjoying gratitude for what exists now. If the exercise goes beyond this glimpse and turns into melancholic rumination, it loses its Stoic purpose and becomes a tool for self-destruction. Field application, career, relationships, and the engineering of distance. When the Stoic leaves their morning sanctuary armed with this psychological arsenal, they enter the arena of professional and social life with steady steps. In the workplace, where ambitions clash, pressures mount, and fierce competition thrives, Stoicism offers a lifeline against burnout. This manifests in completely detaching effort from recognition and reward. A Stoic performs their work with mastery, honesty, and integrity, not coveting a promotion controlled by a moody manager or seeking praise obscured by envy, but because mastering the work itself is an embodiment of the virtues of wisdom and justice they impose upon themselves. If a promotion comes, they receive it calmly and without arrogance. If it is withheld, their self-confidence is unshaken, because their value is not derived from a plaque on the company wall, but from alignment with their strict moral standards. In the vast field of human relationships, Stoicism teaches us to love sincerely and to fulfill our duties toward friends and partners with utmost nobility, yet without attaching our happiness to their behaviors. We offer affection because virtue demands it, not because we expect a guaranteed return. The dilemma of toxic people, between testing virtue and the necessity of firmness. Perhaps one of the most complex challenges facing a Stoic practitioner in this era, which requires careful unpacking, is dealing with harmful individuals, or what is modernly termed toxic people, whether they are manipulative colleagues or draining relatives. Does Stoicism, by virtue of its call for patience and endurance, dictate that we remain in their circles and absorb their harm, considering them a test of our virtue and immunity? This is a flawed and limited understanding. Stoicism is not a philosophy of masochism, nor does it advocate for submissiveness. It is true that the Stoic philosopher refuses to get angry at a toxic person, realizing that this harm stems from the person's ignorance of virtue and their spiritual sickness. Therefore, they view them through a lens of objective pity, not hatred. However, this internal understanding and tolerance never means external, material leniency. One of the four cardinal virtues in Stoicism is justice, and justice requires protecting oneself from injustice and senseless harm. Another virtue is courage, which manifests here in the ability to say no and set strict, clear boundaries. If someone is spreading toxins in your workplace or your life, the proper Stoic application is to build an isolating wall between you and them. You do not do this while trembling with anger, nor do you accompany it with insults or a desire for revenge. Rather, you do it with the coldness of a surgeon and the rationality of a sage. You do not hate a scorpion because its nature is to sting. A Stoic accepts the existence of the scorpion as part of nature's external diversity, which they do not control, but they have full control over the distance separating them from it. Setting firm boundaries and perhaps cutting off toxic relationships entirely if necessary is a quintessential Stoic act. It protects your internal kingdom from depletion and saves your psychological energy to be invested in what benefits you and society, instead of wasting it in futile wars with lost souls who have no desire to reform. This is how Stoicism strikes a balance, a heart expansive enough to understand human weakness, and a firm mind that refuses to let this weakness breach the walls of its tranquility. In order for the Stoic practitioner to precisely adjust these distances and make decisions, whether to stay or leave, to be firm or to overlook, without floundering in the mud of random emotions or destructive anger, they need an unerring internal standard. A person cannot face the complexities of daily life and the constant provocations of others relying solely on instinctive reactions. Hence, Stoic philosophers provide us with a precise moral compass and a dual mental filter encapsulated in self-evaluation questions. The compass of tranquility, the filter of the core. Questions. Every time you face a provoking situation, a person trying to incite your anger, or a sudden crisis that ruins your day, Stoicism invites you to hit the pause button in your mind before uttering a single word or taking any action. In this brief gap between the external stimulus and the internal response, you must ask yourself two fundamental questions that act as a strict algorithm to filter reality. The first question, is this within my control? This is a swift and practical invocation of the dichotomy of control principle we established earlier. This question is the first safety valve that cuts the power to the circuit of anger. When someone offends you and you ask yourself, is my control over this person's tongue or their bad manners within my sphere of control? The definitive answer is no. At that exact moment, the justification for emotional reactivity collapses. You realize that your anger will not refine their morals, nor will it erase the word that was said. This question instantly liberates you from the burden of trying to fix the unfixable and redirects your energy inward. The second question, does my upcoming reaction reflect my virtuous character? Once the first question shatters the illusion of controlling the external, the second question arrives to direct your free will internally. Very well, the person offended you, and that is out of your control, but how will you respond? This is your domain of absolute control. Will you return the offense with an offense and allow them to drag you down to their moral level? Or will you ignore them with a wise coldness that reflects your elevation and self-transcendence? Here, the question becomes a tool for self-evaluation, not event evaluation. However, for this second question to carry true meaning and not be merely a vague inquiry, we must pause at length on the word virtuous. What is virtue in the Stoic dictionary? The quartet of virtue, the pillars of the Stoic moral edifice. Virtue to the Stoics is not just a fleeting commendable trait or social behavior meant to please people, rather it is the highest and only good, summum bonum. It is a state of mental and spiritual perfection that makes a person live in absolute harmony with their rational nature and the laws of the universe. The Stoics divided this supreme virtue into four main interconnected pillars. The construction of character cannot be completed without their combined presence. 1. Practical wisdom, phronesis. Wisdom here is not about reading extensively or memorizing theories. It is knowing what to do and what to avoid. It is the piercing ability to distinguish between true good, which is virtue itself, true evil, which is vice and succumbing to base desires, and the indifference that lie between them, such as wealth, fame, health, and the opinions of others. Wisdom is the clear lens that makes you view people's annoying behaviors as mere natural phenomena, like rain or wind, so you do not get angry at them, but rather deal with them consciously. It is the knowledge that guides you to choose the right response at the right time. 2. Justice, 𝒂𝒂𝒔𝒊𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂. Stoic justice goes far beyond courtrooms. It is the profound vision that we are all parts of one body, humanity, and citizens of one world, cosmopolitanism. To be just means acting fairly with everyone, even those who wrong you. Justice prevents you from seeking blind revenge, reminding you that harming another is, in its essence, harming your own soul and the human fabric to which you belong. It is the virtue that makes you set boundaries for toxic people, as we mentioned earlier, not out of hatred, but out of fairness. It is just to protect yourself, and it is just not to allow them to persist in their wrongdoings against you. 3. Courage, Andrea. Courage is often associated with battlefields and facing death, but Stoic courage is far deeper. It is moral and spiritual courage. It is the ability to stick to your principles when it would be easy to abandon them. Courage is standing firm and not losing your mind when anxiety attacks you. It is looking into the eye of a crisis while continuing to perform your duty. In the context of dealing with provocation, courage manifests in its greatest form when you possess the strength to suppress your bouts of anger. The brave person is not the one who screams and breaks things, but the one who faces the storm of their internal emotions and tames it before it breaks out into the open. 4. Temperance/self-discipline, 𝒒∫. This is the virtue of the breaks within the human soul. Temperance is the ability to control desires, limit emotional outbursts, and avoid overreacting. When a person is provoked, their voice tends to rise, their words lose balance, and things get magnified in their mind. Temperance is that internal guard that steps in to say, "Stop, that is enough, do not overreact." It is the discipline that allows you to enjoy life's pleasures without being enslaved by them, and to face its hardships without being crushed by them. Therefore, when you ask yourself the question, does my reaction reflect my virtuous character? You are effectively passing your decision through these 4 filters. Is what I am about to do wise? Is it fair to myself and to the other? Does it reflect my courage in controlling myself? And is it temperate and balanced without exaggeration? Transforming these 2 questions from a mere idea into an entrenched mental habit, a reflex, requires continuous training. But it is training well worth the effort because it transforms you from an autumn leaf blown about by the winds of people's words and actions into a solid rock upon which the waves of provocation crash, leaving you alone as the absolute master of your internal kingdom.